In Ephesians, as in each level, you have a spiritual test, and that test here is going to be the faith test. At this level, you now have the resources to pass this test. You've probably been having the faith test now and again during your life, and sometimes you did okay on it, other times you fell on your face. But now you have more resources, and so you should be able to start passing this test more consistently. This is mentioned in Ephesians 6:13 through 16, which says, "Because of this, put on the whole armor of Elohim, so that you may be able to engage the evil one, and being prepared in everything, you will stand firm." Verse 16, "And with these take to you the shield of built up trust, by which you will be empowered with strength to quench all the fiery arrows of the evil one." The faith test may have a temptation in it to do a sin. Some examples of this faith test you can see in the relationships in step 55. If when you deal with another person, you have a temptation to do it incorrectly. That is obviously not passing the faith test. But if you do it correctly, then you're passing the faith test. And how do you do that? You do that by the washing of the water of the Word. When you get inundated or immersed in the Word, then you're going to operate in situations better. You're going to go to God about them rather than trying to solve them by the flesh. The faith test is not a test of your choosing. God will bring you this test, and you will have to pass it when it comes upon you. So when you have these kinds of tests, take a little time to evaluate them afterwards and see, did you use faith to accomplish it correctly, or did you use the flesh and not accomplish it correctly? Matthew 21:21 says, "Yeshua answered and said to them, Truly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, not only will you do this miracle of the fig, but even if you say to this mountain, be removed and fall into the sea, it will happen." So faith is very powerful. It can accomplish all kinds of things. Ephesians 3:10 through 13. "So that by way of the congregation, the extraordinary wisdom of God would be made known to the rulers and to the authorities that are in heaven, which wisdom he had prepared from the ages and has performed in Yeshua Messiah our Lord, in whom we have boldness and access in the confidence of his built-up trust. Because of this, I am petitioning that I will not be weary in my trials that are for you, because this is your glory." So we want to pray about our situations ahead of time so that we can receive the answer from God. This built-up trust idea, built-up trust, the reason that I'm translating it that way, there are a number of words in the Hebrew for trust or faith, and this particular one that is used is dealing with the idea of building up trust. Sin is the same way. You have sin, and then you have wickedness. Okay, sin is where you're doing a single sin. Wickedness is where you build up sin after sin after sin. Same here. Faith is a single thing that you do at one time, but as you do it over and over and over again, you build up faith. Okay, so when we pass the faith test, this is a testimony to Satan and the demons that God can handle things, and that their position that they have a better way of doing things is incorrect. Ephesians 3:17. Messiah would dwell in built up trust and in your hearts in love as your root and your foundation become strong. So we have an inheritance because of the fact that Messiah is in us when we walk in his Spirit, and because we're wanting to get to the place where we do that consistently. Then we have this inheritance when we're actually doing it consistently. And this inheritance means that we have the ability to cast that mountain into the sea if you want. Whatever you need to do to accomplish your mission, your calling, you have the power to do that because you're walking in the Spirit. And that power is translated from prayer to an actual thing that happens by faith. Faith is the means of accomplishing that. The more built up trust we have, the more Yeshua can live through our actions in the world. Our root and our foundation become strong by building up trust. In other words, building up trust makes us less vulnerable to false teachings and temptation. Ephesians 4:13 through 16. Until we all become one in the built up trust and the knowledge of the Son of God and one mature man. So this is talking about the apostle level is where we are maxing out our trust, where we can walk in that, where we can do things, whatever it is that we need to do. In the measure of the standing of the fullness of Messiah, in other words, the whatever measure of Messiah is operating in you is the measure of the power that you have. So once you do that consistently, then you have full power. But as we operate in these faith tests, we're going to see more and more power because our faith is going to be more, and having more faith really doesn't mean that the faith is bigger. It means that you're spending more time walking in the Spirit, and it means that your focus on Messiah is bigger. It means that Messiah is blocked less by you. Continuing in verse 14, I'm in Ephesians 4:14. And we should not be babies who are shaken and blown about by every wind of the deceitful teachings of men, who in their craftiness are plotting to deceive. But we should be steadfast in our love, so that in everything we ourselves may grow up in Messiah, who is the head. And from him the whole body is fit together and is knit together in all the joints, according to the gift that is given by measure to each member for the growth of the body. And that is building up and that its building up would be accomplished in love. Remember, the definition of love is the Torah. So in other words, we can walk righteously by faith. And so we build up faith in order to walk more righteously, in order to not fall into temptation and sin. So the faith test is going to help us in all of the different things that we are doing here on the path to accomplish the building up of trust, building up of Messiah, building up of walking consistently in Messiah, building up of righteousness, building up of power, okay, all of these things. Now the congregation is going to recognize that you have passed the faith test. What that means is that when you have a faith test, if you bring that to the congregation to pray about, okay, and then you go through and you accomplish that thing, and you can testify about how you were walking in the Spirit during that time and so forth, the congregation then is going to use discernment to see what they think about how you did on that test, and they will recognize you. And that's in order to pass the Ephesians level, okay? And of course, we have to do all of the other levels also. We've got to be operating more in the fruit of the Spirit to keep growing in the Galatians level stuff. And we've got to be flowing in the Spirit in the meetings. The flowing in the Spirit of the meetings is the most concrete test that we have, because that really is something that you can look at much more objectively than some of these other things. But if that is going good, and it looks like you're passing the faith test, you combine those two things to be very sure that you have passed the Ephesians level. Okay, now the faith test is obviously going to be something that you're going to have throughout your whole life. And because of the fact that we have the resources to pass that test at this level, from now on, we should be passing the test. Okay, so if you become an apostle, for example, and you fail this test, then that means that you're not operating at the apostle level anymore. You are back in the Ephesians level. And you need to come back here and look at, what are you missing? What have you failed to incorporate in your life to get that fixed? Now there's two kinds of faith tests. One is where you are you just have to pray through it, and God is going to accomplish it by answering that prayer. And so that is a passive type of faith test. And waiting on Him is what is required on that kind of faith test. A little bit more advanced type of faith test is when you have to actually do something. So you would pray about the situation, and then you would get some instruction that this is what God wants you to do. And so you go ahead and you do that, but again, you want to be walking in the Spirit when you do that. And then you're going to see the results come back, that God will accomplish the thing, because usually the thing that you have to do is really not enough to fix the problem, okay? So it's God is asking you to do something to participate in it, but the problem isn't getting fixed by whatever little thing that you do. It's getting fixed by God coming into the situation and doing miracles, right? So, but if you don't do the thing that you're supposed to do, then you're going to not pass the test. Okay, so this is something that you need to look at as you go through. Get the congregation involved so that the testimony can go out. If you just do it by yourself, there's no testimony, right? And the testimony is important. We just read a passage where it's going out to the demons to testify that about God's power. And when the congregation hears about that, that's how that testimony goes out. Okay, the faith test. We have to use the resources that we have. We've got to get into the pouring of the word onto us in order to pass that test, and we have to pray about it and come to God in order to pass that test. And we may have to do something, whatever instruction he gives, as a part of passing that test, and that has to be done by walking in the Spirit. And we want to increase this as we go along. The more times we pass the faith test, the more we're going to build up our faith to the point where we can move that mountain if we need to. Okay, the faith test.